Hello, and welcome to the Managing Across Diverse Populations series sponsored by CIBER at Indiana University. My name is Linda Dunn-Jensen, and I'm a faculty member at the Kelley School of Business and a member of the Department of Management and Entrepreneurship. I am delighted to be your host in this four-part series on managing across diverse populations. As Thomas Friedman suggested, and we all know, the world is flat. This means that now more than ever, the opportunities to do business and travel around the world is possible. While this offers exciting opportunities, it also creates challenges in working with and managing across diverse cultures. It's fairly well accepted that with each passing day, societies and organizations are becoming less homogeneous, and we will find ourselves dealing with cultural diversity in many more places in our lives. From our neighborhoods and schools to our workplaces and virtual communities, we are much more likely to interact with people who are different than ourselves. That means everyone needs to increase their cultural awareness. It is the aim of this four-part series to provide tools for you to begin building your cultural awareness. ¿Están listos? Are you ready? Before I move into today's presentation, I would like to briefly let you know where we are heading in this series. Today's presentation, Part 1, will provide an introduction to me, your host, and introduce the topic of culture in maybe a more formal manner. Once you have learned about many aspects of culture, in the second presentation, I will be discussing with you Hofstede's cultural dimensions. This discussion about cultural dimensions will give you a framework to begin to think about different aspects of cultures in different countries. In Part 3, we will then move into applying the cultural dimensions. I will be presenting several likely business interactions that you may face in the global workplace and give you some suggestions on how understanding Hofstede's cultural dimensions may help you be more effective in your interactions. Finally, in Part 4 of the series, I will be interviewing 3 current Kelley students. 2 of the students are international students who will be speaking about their experiences they have had over the last year coming to the U.S., both as a student and now after a few months internship in a U.S. company. The 3rd student, an American, just returned from a 4-month experience in Hong Kong. Throughout this series, I offer this statement as a guiding principle. To be culturally effective doesn't mean you are an authority in the values and beliefs of every culture. What it means is that you hold a deep respect for cultural differences and that you are eager to learn and willing to accept that there are many ways of viewing the world. When we think about culture, it can be defined as the unique character of a social group, the values and norms shared by its members that set it apart from other social groups. Broadly, it encompasses economic, social, political, and religious institutions. More importantly, it influences the way we think about how things work, when we make observations about behaviors, and also cause and affect relationships. One of your goals as you travel and do business with people of other cultures is to develop a sense of intercultural competence. This is your ability to understand and leverage the differing cultural worldviews held by you and by others to create better relationships, improve your own performance, and build success for everyone involved. As you begin your journey in understanding other cultures, it may be helpful to think about culture as an iceberg. The portion of an iceberg which is visible above water is only a small piece of a much larger whole. You can think of culture as the observable characteristics of a group, be it their food, dances, music, arts, or greeting rituals. The reality, however, is that these are merely an external manifestation of the broad components of culture, the complex ideas and deeply held preferences known as attitudes and values. Deep below the waterline are a culture's core values. These are primary learned ideas of what is good, right, desirable, and acceptable, as well as what is bad, wrong, undesirable, and unacceptable. In many cases, different cultural groups share the similar core values, such as honesty or respect or family, but these are often interpreted differently in different situations and incorporated in unique ways into specific attitudes we apply in daily situations. Ultimately, these internal forces become visible to the casual observer in the form of observable behaviors, such as the words we use, the ways we act, the laws we enact, and the ways we communicate with each other. There are many areas that make up of a culture. This wheel will start to give you some high-level categories to start gather more information and arrange your observations about the culture of a country that you may be visiting or working in, or working with others from that culture. The first category may be economics. When we think about economics, it's really the way the people in that culture are making their living, how they form their money, and their division of labor. The second category is religion. When we think about religion, there are many aspects of it. One may be attitudes towards the unknown. Some cultures have mystical beliefs and superstitions. Others have recognized religion and religious practices, and some cultures have a combination of these. The third category to consider is the social institutions. When we think about that, it's how families are organized, how marriage is handled, is it arranged or chosen, what type of family groupings happen, our rites of passages, and the educational system. Basically, it's how people interact with other people. Or the fourth category to consider is language. We have verbal and nonverbal communication in cultures, and we have to be paying attention to that. When we think about the fifth category, art, we want to think about the music, drama, dance, the folklore in the culture, paintings, drawing, different aspects of how they present their artwork. The sixth category is looking at food, clothing, and shelter. We want to look at what types of food do people eat, how is it produced, and what animals are domesticated. Look at the type of clothing worn in an area. Is it traditional or more modern? What about the adornments? And what type of shelter or dwellings do people live in and build? And furthermore, what type of transportation do they have? Our seventh category to consider is recreation. How do people use their leisure time, and what games do they play? And our eighth category is finally looking at the government and authority, and specifically looking at how is the society governed. Before we end today's presentation, I would like to share a personal story I had in which I was not as informed about a culture as maybe I should have been. To set the stage, this is the Merlion in front of the Fullerton Hotel in Singapore. Several years ago, before I started at Kelly, I had an interview in Singapore at a university in which I also had a friend working there. In many of our discussions, she spoke about how westernized Singapore was as a country. Given my discussion with her and the fact that I was arranging the travel plans at the end of the semester, which you know is quite busy for faculty members, I did not research much about the culture of Singapore. I figured the 20+ hours on the plane would give me more than enough time. During the planning stage of my trip, the admin person from the school in Singapore inquired 3 times about my dietary restrictions that I may have. At that time, given how busy I was quite annoyed that she kept asking me about food. Finally, I just sent her an email saying I was vegetarian. I figured that if we were having a department lunch, I knew I would be much more adventurous about eating vegetables than other items. Well, to my embarrassment, because I was unsure what I would eat was so important, when reading my travel guide, it stated that when invited to dinner, your host or hostess may ask you about dietary restrictions to accommodate the diverse ethnic and religious backgrounds of people in Singapore. Here's an example in which religion influences the food to be served and the manner in which people are invited to dinners. Maybe you have an example yourself. Thank you again for the opportunity to talk with you about managing across diverse populations. I would like to recap 3 key takeaways as you begin to increase your cultural effectiveness. Remember, culture is like an iceberg. While there is much to see on top of the surface, what is below is larger and invisible, but very influential. Using the wheel of culture to start to think about how to influence your own perspective, and more importantly, how does it influence others from cultures different than your own. And finally, reflect about your own personal stories. What went well in your travels or your business interactions, and what could have gone better? I look forward to our next part of the series, Part 2, Hofstede's Cultural Dimensions. Thank you.